Κύριε Αναστασίου, πρέπει να ανοίξετε το μικρόφωνο σας. Είναι πολύ σημαντικό.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome all ladies and gentlemen who joined us. I'm thrilled to welcome you all to our 4th annual conference, Tourism of Tomorrow, 2021. After the first 3 events we got in 2018, 2019, and 2020, to be honest, no one was expecting the level of disruption that the COVID-19 crisis would bring globally. The reality we have been facing during the last 13, 14 months could have been only some sort of scenario of a movie, a scenario that not many people would have taken that seriously as a possibility to happen in reality. Still though, tourism, along with all other sectors of the economy, has to move on, taking into consideration the extremely volatile, ever-changing and fluid environment we live in. Today, in our event, and with the kind sharing of the expertise and knowledge of all our distinguished guests and speakers, we will try to shed some light into these uncharted waters. At this point, I would like to ask the President of Anatolia College, Dr. Panos Vlachos, to salute and declare the beginning of our event. Mr. President.
Thank you, Anestis. Good afternoon to all. On behalf of our entire community, I would also like to welcome you to the 4th Annual Tourism of Tomorrow conference at the American College of Thessaloniki. I'm truly pleased that despite the present difficulties, leaders from across the tourism industry are still able to gather virtually to discuss the new challenges and opportunities facing the sector. As you all know, the pandemic has disrupted all industries, education included. But I'm proud to say that the American College of Thessaloniki has remained active and dedicated to promoting tourism and hospitality education in Greece. Our degree programs at the undergraduate and graduate levels are continuing to prepare the leaders of tomorrow for exciting careers in tourism and hospitality. We have also remained actively engaged with our connections across the industry. Today, you'll have the opportunity to hear from industry experts from a wide range of backgrounds and with a common focus: how to rebuild tourism and emerge stronger following the pandemic. As we await the opening of activities and look ahead to summer 2021, I know that you will gain valuable insight from the future-oriented perspectives. So please allow me to extend a warm welcome in particular to our conference speakers. Thank you all for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. As I'm sure you'll all agree, we are moving into an uncertain future for tourism, but one with tremendous possibility for growth. So as we face the tourism of tomorrow, it is the connections we share that will lead to this growth. Let us all learn from each other now and work towards a day where we can connect in person once more. With these few remarks, thank you for joining us today, and I'm sure that you will enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. At this point, I would like to ask Mr. Nikos Sapountzis, the moderator of our event, to join us. Nikos is a graduate of Anatolia College himself and is a very experienced professional in the sector. So, Nico, the floor and the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Anestis. Honorable Mr. President of Anatolia College, Mr. Dr. Panos Vlachos, respectable Chairman of Anatolia College, Dr. Nicholas Kourgouliadis, respectable Coordinator, Mr. Anestis Anastasiou, dear attendees, guests and colleagues, distinguished speakers. I'm honored to open and moderate the 4th consecutive tourism conference organized and hosted by American College Hospitality and Tourism Management Program. This year's topic is society and tourism, in particular, are facing an unprecedented crisis, tourism of tomorrow. The theme focuses on building resilience through disruption. How can the hospitality and tourism industries emerge stronger after a pandemic? let me present you our first speaker to talk about all this, Dr. Christos Kabolis. Mr. Kabolis is the chief economist at the IMD World Competitiveness Center. He was also the former executive director of the International Center for Finance at the Yale University, and also a former associate professor of economics and finance at Alba Graduate Business School in Athens. And he's going to speak about what competitiveness can tell us about resilience. Dr. Kabolis, I'm delighted to present you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Mr. Sabougis. Thank you, distinguished guests. It's an honor for me to be part of this very intriguing conference. What I will talk to you about, as Mr. Sabougis already said, is I will try, let me share my screen. I will try actually to make a connection between competitiveness and resilience, because in the end of the day, we have a situation of a major disruption. And as the previous speaker said, we need to find a path to navigate forward. So let's put certain definitions a little bit. Let's explain what exactly we are talking about. Competitiveness in the IMD World Competitiveness Center is assumed to be, we define the capacity of a country to create the proper landscape so the private sector can create sustainable value. Resilience is a very trendy term nowadays, but sometimes it's difficult to define. Personally, when I think about resilience, I think that it is encompassing three aspects. It encompasses the capacity to persist. It encompasses the ability to adapt new strategies, new models. And finally, the aptitude to flourish, because as we were discussing before about tourism, we need to think about the next day. So what I will try to do is I will try to give you the big picture. I will discuss with you why we say that we have a disruption right now. And then I will try to use the competitiveness model that we have at IMD to explain the two of the three ingredients of resilience, namely the persistency, which essentially is founded on the strengths and challenges that we have as an economy, and then the part about adaptation. How good are we to adapt in new techniques, new models, new technologies? So we are very, very well aware, almost a year and 4 months now, we were introduced to COVID-19. We are speaking about Corona, and since then, everything has changed, as Mr. Sabougis and Dr. Vlachos said earlier. And what we see here is the number of new cases per day per million people. And we see that we have fluctuations, and some countries are in the second wave, some countries is in the third wave. What I want to point out is that this is extremely recent. It's just a couple of days ago from the Our World in Data. And as you can see, Greece does not do particularly well. Now, what are the implications of this? Essentially, what happened, as you recall, and very quickly I'll remind you, international global chains have been disrupted. Therefore, we had a decrease in the aggregate supply in different countries. This resulted, of course, the pandemic resulted in isolation of different people, which meant that people couldn't go to work. This implied that we had less output produced, but at the same time, it implied that the income of these people decreased, which resulted essentially in shrinking of different economies. Very importantly for us, all the aspects of what we call globalization have been affected. That is, the movement of capital, the movement of goods and services, the trade, the mobility of people, extremely important for tourism, and the only thing that actually flourished during this period is the mobility of ideas. And this flourished helped to technology, like exactly what we do right now, where each one of us are in different places around the world, and we manage to talk all together. So the movement of capital decreased substantially. That is, the foreign direct investments decreased by almost 48% in 2020. Let me show you a graph about trade. This is the general trend. It normalizes everything to 2015 as 100. And what we see here is essentially that the biggest decline in the trade was in the second quarter of 2020. The estimates that we use is that this decline in 2020, which was almost 5.3% in the trade growth, will come back by the end of 2021 if we follow the green line and if we have an increase of trade of growth of 8%. But of course, this is not absolutely correct. We don't know. We will see what is going to happen. But the important thing for us is the mobility of the people, and mostly about tourism. So let me show you what the World Tourism Organization gives us as year-to-year change between January of 2020 and January of 2021 with respect of by region. So we see that there is a decrease in tourist arrivals between minus 77% in the Americas and minus 96% in Asia and the Pacific. In Europe, we have a decline of 85%. And I know that my colleagues who will speak more specifically about tourism will give more information, but let me bring to your attention this very, very nice recovery tracker that is provided by the WTO. And this is in general what happens the last year in a number of different indicators. What I would like to keep from this picture is actually an optimism that exists, that we see all the measures actually increasing, and especially the sentiment, that is the expectation that the travel is going to come back, is very, very high. This is for the whole world, but we can go also in South Europe and see that pretty much it resembles exactly the same thing. So the Mediterranean countries in Europe, Greece included, of course, realizes an increase in the last month or so, because this is until March. So between January and March, we see an increase in the different elements that are indicators of tourism. So disruption for sure, and a major one. What can we do about that? Let's try to think about persistency. And in thinking about persistency, I think it's good to bring the competitiveness ranking. And because sometimes by using one particular year, one gets the wrong picture, let me give you the evolution between 97 and 2020. And I include here several European countries because we are in the same region. And we face these problems more or less in the same way. And what we see is that, of course, the ranking, that is the capacity of the economy to produce the environment for sustainable value creation by the private sector, fluctuates through time. And what I would like to actually point here is that Greece, in the last few years, we see an increase in the ranking. It fares better and better. Now, if we want to think about Greece, we have to understand about how persistent Greek economy is. We have to think about the benefits, the strong elements, the strengths, and the areas of improvement. And I will be brief about that. We know most of these issues, but let me remind you some things. First of all, the real GDP growth. And the real GDP growth, we see that we went through a major financial crisis between the years 2009 and after, until 2015. And we see the red curve, which is Greece, that was much more substantial than any other European country. And in fact, we managed to start improving ourselves sometime after mid-2015. And in 2019, we had a growth of 1.9%, the growth of GDP, which was very, very nice. But of course, as you may recall, IMF came and said that 2020 probably we will have a decline of around 9.5 to 10%. The numbers are not there yet, but nevertheless, this is what we are expecting. The good thing is that we are thinking that we will be able to actually increase this number substantially in 2022 and 2023. Another indicator which is good to have in mind is how open our economy is. And a measure of openness is the trade to GDP ratio. And we see that actually Greece is doing quite well. In the 63 countries that we study, Greece is about the middle. So the last ranking, and you see again that there is an increase in the ranking of Greece, is 38. Now, what are some of the big issues that the Greek economy has? They have to do with the ability of the government to raise revenues, that is, to collect taxes, and the type of services that it provides. And this gives actually a very, very nice outline of where exactly we stand. No wonder you see here that we are in the lower 10 economies of the ranking. This is an area that needs to be improved upon. Is this a major problem? Actually, it is not clear. There is not a clear correlation between competitiveness and the size of the government. That is how large the tax revenues are, and so on and so forth. We have countries like Sweden, which has a very large government, and countries like Singapore, that has a very small government, both of them flourishing and being very, very high up in the competitiveness ranking. At the same time, the burden of the taxes, how high the tax rates are, again, it may not be a problem. Again, if we think about the Nordic countries have very high tax rates. Nevertheless, the services that they provide are very much in need, very much appreciated by the society, and therefore the competitiveness of the economy is very, very high. The final thing that I would like to remind you is the amount of debt. And of course, the debt is a problem for Greece. However, the debt that we have is considered sustainable, and we will be perfectly fine to be able to accommodate the debt that we have until at least IMF believe, and the world institutions believe, at least until 2030, this remains intact. So having said all these areas where the Greek economy needs to improve upon, let's think about some areas that the Greek economy actually does very, very well. And this is a question that we have in the survey that we ran, and we asked executives, we asked mid and upper level executives, whether qualified engineers are available in the country. And you see that actually the answer is places Greece in the 26th position, which means that the capacity, if we want, of very highly skilled in engineering talent is available in Greece. This may not be an important component for tourism, but nevertheless, skilled labor may be. In the skilled labor, we face exactly the same tendency. We have a question where we ask what exactly is the capacity of the economy to satisfy with skilled labor the needs of the market, and the answer is positive, which means that tourism industry or part of tourism industry, especially if they want to apply quality, high quality, will have a very, very good collaborator in the skilled labor of Greece. So, having spoken about these elements, in more or less how we can persist in the Greek economy, let's try to think about the ability to adapt. And here I will bring a ranking that we have with respect to the digital competitiveness of the countries. And in the digital competitiveness, one factor that we try to measure is the future readiness. That is the capacity of the economy. And when I say the economy, I mean individuals, the private sector, companies, and the public sector. So the capacity of these three sectors to use the technology of the future. And the way that we evaluate that is that we try to see what happens at the individual level, and we call that adaptive attitude, what happens at the business level, and this is the business agility, and what happens with respect to the integration of IT in our daily life. And as you can see, we fare in the lower part. We are below the median country of the ones that we study. If we want to go a little bit further, I will point out certain things because we don't have a lot of time, but I would like to point out certain issues that may be part of a conversation in the next segments. The one with respect to the individuals, what I would like to point out is that, you know, many households may have difficulty actually having the actual equipment, having tablets, having smartphones, and therefore this makes it a little bit more difficult to maybe use the mechanisms to provide information to the government on different issues, that is the e-participation. Another issue that it is surprising to me, it is the attitude towards globalization, where we seem to be a little bit negative, despite the fact that we are an open economy, we are a small country, we live with the relationships that we have with the rest of the world, yet we seem that in this survey question that we ask executives, they think that the attitude that we have towards globalization is not as strong. However, what I would like to show is the internet retailing. So in the e-commerce department, where essentially this is what comes out of the COVID period, is that actually Greece, or rather the individual of Greece, the individual members of Greece, the people use internet retailing quite well. So we are around the middle of the countries that we study. When we go in the business agility, what I would like to show, and these are answers that we get from the executives, is that they don't think that the companies are agile, the companies that they're working in. They don't feel that there is ample use of big data and analytics. And therefore, everything that is available in order to navigate things for the future and make better forecasts and better estimates is slightly problematic. With respect to the IT integration, we have to do better in the e-government and cybersecurity. And of course, we have to tackle the problem of software piracy, which brings us in the 52nd position out of the 63 economies. What is nice is actually the entrepreneur fear of failure. That is, essentially, we try to measure individuals between the age of 18 and 64 who have ideas to start a new endeavor, to start, to have a startup, to have a new company, whether they fear about failure and therefore they do not do that. And it seems that actually they're not in that much fear of failure, which is very, very good. Finally, what I would like to point out, and I would like to have this in mind, is that public and private partnerships, we rank 40th, but in many ways, the public-private partnerships are the vehicle of the future. Because now we know that a private sector must do a lot of investments, but also that the public sector can actually be not a substitute of these investments, but it can be a very, very good complement and a collaborative relationship may be the one that can bring solutions to the nation's problems. Having said that, and still speaking about adoption, I would like to say another very positive thing. We spoke about the fear of failure. A similar component is how easy it is for somebody to initiate a new company. And this is measured by the World Bank by measuring how many days does one need in order to actually start a business. And Greece actually is doing fantastically well. We are in number 9 position out of the 63 economies. And with our European partners, actually, we are only behind the Netherlands, who have a lower number of days that they can start something like that. And finally, what I would like to bring is the answer to a question about how adaptive the government is. And here we try to measure if there are changes in the economy, how fast the government can respond to that. And as you see, actually, it is very interesting that we are doing, not very interesting, it is commentable that we are doing extremely well on that area. And in fact, it is actually a point of optimism because we have a pandemic and the disruption is actually nationwide, in addition to the industry-wide. So how should we think about Greece? I love this graph that I will show you because we always think about Greece, in the geographic context that we are part of the Balkans. We just celebrated the 200 years from the beginning of our independence. But let's not forget that Greece is at the very core of Europe. So in this graph, essentially, what I have is all the components that are shared among all the European countries. And what do we see? We see that Greece is only 1 out of 8 economies that actually they're very wealthy. They have very high GDP per capita. They are part of the Eurozone, and they have been part of the European Union since 1981. So I think that this provides a very, very good path in order to find ways to have tourism flourish in the near future and in the long future, because let's not forget, and I would like to end with that the tourism receipts for Greece represent almost 10% of our GDP. So an extremely important component, a powerful industry that we need actually to safeguard and make it flourish. And with that, I thank you very, very much for your attention, and I will stop sharing my slide.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kavoulis, for your kind presentation. We hope we can say that we can be optimistic about Greece is doing very well despite the pandemic in terms of showing fiscal progress. At that point, I would like to pass the microphone to our second speaker. Let me introduce you, Mr. Andreas Scriven. Andreas Scriven is the lead partner of the Hospitality and Leisure at Deloitte UK and Europe. And he is going to present us the evolution, not revolution presentation. Thank you very much, Mr. Scriven, for being here with us and accepting our invitation. I would kindly like to remind you to be so kind and keep the 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and hopefully you can hear me. I'll start out with a confession, if I may. And the reason for that confession is I'm coming to you from a hotel, believe it or not, today. So we're back open in the UK, and I'm making the most of that. So hopefully there's not too much background noise or anything like that. But if there is, please do let me know. And what I'll look to do is, I don't know if you can see my screen yet. Yeah. So what I wanted to do, and just by way of brief introduction, which was kindly already done. So I'm Andreas Scriven, and as mentioned, I head up the hospitality and leisure practice for Deloitte, based here out of London. And in that role, I interact with a wide variety of stakeholders. Be that owners, investors, operators, brands, lenders, governments, and so on, and get a certainly in the current environment, a very varied and interesting view in terms of how those individual stakeholders see the industry progressing, and advising them through that life cycle and all the change. And over the next 10 minutes or so, I just wanted to touch on two areas. One is, I don't think we can look too far ahead without understanding where current sentiment is and how these stakeholders look at the evolution over the next 3 to 6 months. But then also I want to spend some time around trends that we see as being critical beyond the pandemic. So it's a pleasure to share that with you. Some would say it's a challenge. So I think all of us experience all of these changes that are happening almost on a day-to-day basis, with markets closing, reopening, and so on. So predicting the future is more challenging than usual, but hopefully there will be some views that will be helpful to you, and you can take away with you. So if we first start and before we look too far ahead, I think, as I said, there's no way of avoiding the necessity to acknowledge in these unparalleled times that we live in, both as an industry and as a society as a whole. So we've never seen an impact such as COVID on our industry. And I refer to that as the 3 S's. So not in speed, not in scale, and not in severity. And inevitably, this will have an impact on our industry going forward. But I also think it's important to take a step back as we think about the future of tourism, that not everything should be and will be defined by the situation that we're in right now. So there will be change, and change that was happening already that will continue. I think and we can see this already, change that was happening already, but is now being accelerated or changed by the impact of COVID. And yes, there will be some lasting change that is driven by COVID that will probably stay with us permanently as an industry. But this last category, will be more of an evolution than a revolution. I think there's a lot of discussion around aspects of the industry and people predicting the downfall of, the death of meetings and events business, or the corporate travel, or if they'll ever come back, or how will city center hotels recover, and will they be impacted? Will they have to evolve? Absolutely, but they will adapt, and in my opinion, they will thrive again. So I've got a few slides to share just with some data on it, to share some sentiment with you across the industry. All of this data is freely available to you through the presentation and a lot more granularity. But what I thought I would do is just give you a pulse of where consumers are, where their behavior is, and what they're looking to do in the short term going forward. And I think that's especially relevant in an environment where benchmark data and trading information is very limited. And if we look at a number of the kind of key source markets for Greece in terms of tourism, what we can see is there's a pretty volatile picture. And I think there is still limited appetite for air travel across all of these key source markets. And there's also still a lot of concern around staying in hotels, so the safety of staying in hotels, and that as an industry is clearly something that we need to address. Notably, as you can see on the chart here, people are planning to take an international flight for leisure purpose in the next 3 months is still below 20% in most markets. So, what does that mean? That means that potentially we may be in for a challenging summer, and all of us hoped, of course, that with the vaccine rollouts that may be able to be mitigated. So I think a lot of businesses will have to plan through that next cycle. That being said, sentiment is slowly improving. So we're moving away from the low points that we've previously seen, and we are now getting to a more positive trajectory across most countries. So the question I get asked the most is, when is this nightmare going to be over? And we run a hotel sentiment survey, and the general consensus is that the disruption from COVID is going to last into 2022. Some even more pessimistic, some getting a bit more optimistic around that, but the bulk, as you can see on the slide, focus on 2022, and that's been pretty stable over the time that we've run this survey over the last year. And in terms of the question of when will we get back to business as usual or a normalized trading environment, that then extends into 2023. And some segments, I think it's fair to say, or some locations or some types of hotels may see recovery before then, but in the short term, the impact is still looks like it's going to be 2023 for most. Clearly, there's a general sentiment that domestic and leisure-based travel will come back more rapidly, and anybody with exposure to international and corporate travel will probably suffer a little bit more. There's also a question of what business as usual will look like. Is that levels of 2019, or was that a peak environment as it was anyway? That being said, it's not all negative. Clearly, cash is king at the moment. That is what most businesses are focused on. But interestingly, if you look at this slide of where the key priorities are for the next 4 weeks, even for hotel owners, hotel investors, and so on, if you look at number 2, transactions and expansion has significantly accelerated, and probably quicker than many of us expected. So that's a real positive that businesses are now looking to the future and how they can expand and potentially take advantage of this very difficult environment. And very interestingly, also a focus on strategic growth initiatives in position 5 there. So, and that's also looking at long-term investments. And we've seen more and more businesses plan for what the future may look like. And that pivot away from how do we survive to how do we thrive, and how do we succeed within the industry. So whilst the background of what happens next is still very much focused on what is happening now, we're seeing a clear trend in the industry for those who have been able to secure their liquidity and their cash positions and so on, that they are looking to the future and looking to adapt and evolve, as I mentioned. So So what comes after the pandemic? And I think, it's difficult to do that at the moment, looking beyond the pandemic. But what I really wanted to do, just over the next 5 minutes or so, is highlight a number of trends that we are seeing, some that were already shaping the industry, some that are being, as I said, accelerated by COVID. And I think it's important to start out with saying that, a lot of people are predicting a trend that international travel is stifled or even dead, and it's not. It's on hold, and there's been clear evidence in the market to kind of confirm that. So as and when international travel had reopened, people took advantage of that. You think of Dubai, you think of some of the Spanish islands that opened. So there's a significant amount of pent-up demand that is looking to travel, wants to travel, and will travel again. So this idea that there's a trend moving away from international travel is not the case in our view. It will adapt, and that will also be impacted by issues around sustainability and ESG agendas and so on. But that was already happening pre-COVID. I think if you look at hospitality owners, the winners will be those who have evolved, who have taken this period of time and looked at their business model, they've looked at their cost structures, and they have reconfigured, and they will benefit from a reduced amount of supply coming into the market, and weaker competitors potentially that have just not had the same resources available to them, that maybe have not been able to secure the same level of liquidity that they have. So that positioning is now setting up the winners for the next 3 to 5 years. Now, on the next topic, I could speak for probably an hour at least, which is the kind of digitization of our industry, and that clearly has been a slow process, but we see this as one of the areas that will be materially accelerated by COVID. And the consumer will benefit from this, both in terms of friction points being removed, but also travel experiences being enhanced. And the industry still needs to do a lot there to catch up to other industries, but we're seeing some really positive signs of what's being implemented in the industry, some of it necessitated by things like digital COVID passports and so on, but also changing the whole booking experience, and we expect that to continue. I think interestingly on the food and beverage side, most of us, if we wanted a restaurant quality meal, and certainly if my cooking's anything to go by, I do occasionally need a restaurant quality meal. The only way to get that was to have that delivered to your front door, and those food delivery services of restaurant quality food, so not fast food, not the pizzas and so on, is here to stay, and it will be interesting to see how hoteliers can take advantage of that to increase their market share and reach customers they previously wouldn't have been able to reach, or reach customers more frequently as well. Just the last one I'll pick out on this slide, given our limited time, is this blurring of lines between business and leisure. And I think as we've all learned to work in different environments, I'm working from a very different environment today than I usually would be, but also the shift to working from home versus in an office is going to change behaviors. And I think there's an expectation that people may look at a situation where they would have gone on a 2-week holiday, and they might extend that for a 3rd week because they know they can work in that 3rd week but still have quality time with their family. And as an industry, again, we need to make sure that we cater to that change in consumer behavior to ensure that the infrastructure is there, that when I want to be in business mode, I can be in business mode. When I want to switch back to leisure, I can do that as well. So this biz leisure trend is expected to ramp up as well. Just moving on, and again, I'll pick just a few of the trends out here, just given time. But and I'll just pick, I think, 2 or 3 of these here. And safety is still going to be unavoidable in the short term, that focus on safety, and many customers will simply not travel if they think there's a risk or weakness anywhere in the supply chain. And I think that is the really challenging bit here. your hotel could be the safest hotel in the world, but if the customer doesn't feel that the transport to the airport, be it by taxi, be it by train, be it by any kind of public transport, is not safe, or the airport isn't safe, or the airlines themselves aren't safe, they will simply not travel. So working collaboratively across the whole travel ecosystem is going to be hugely critical. And you know, the expectation that the safety and security of guests is whilst it can't be guaranteed, is front and center on the agenda, is going to be critical, not just for the next few months, but indefinitely. I think then if you look at the relationship between owners and operators, for example, in the hotel space, we think there's going to be some significant pressure put on changes to things like management contracts or lease agreements. You know, I think there's many landlords out there who 12 months ago felt they had a tenant, a AAA tenant, and their rent was, you know, virtually guaranteed, and they've had a very different experience over the last 12 months. So I think, you know, from that perspective, certain terms, certain approaches to various contracts, be they management contracts, leases, franchise agreements, and so on, are likely to change. But of course, there's a friction point there, because if somebody has to give up some certainty.
Very sorry to interrupt. Just to remind you about the time. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, and the only other one I'll pick up is around sustainability. I think, you know, absolutely critical for the industry to think about that. If you're not thinking about that today already, you're behind the curve. And it's also not just doing the right thing, but also making sure that you can measure what you're doing, measure the impact, and communicate that to your stakeholders. So given the limited amount of time, I will leave it there, and I will close on the note that inherently I'm an optimist, but I remain optimistic about our sector. I think if you look at all the medium and long-term indicators that were there pre-COVID, pointed to significant growth for our industry, and I am convinced that as we navigate out of this, we will return to that as well. So hopefully, for looking to a bright future for the industry, and I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scriven, for your presentation. Thank you very much for your presentation, and I hope that tourism investments are a key factor to global evolution. Thank you for being here with us today, and I'm delighted to pass the microphone to our next speaker, let me introduce you to Mr. Matthias Schulze. Mr. Schulze is the Managing Director at the German Convention Bureau, which holds offices also in Frankfurt, in New York, and Beijing. And of course, he's going to talk about the MICE industry, especially about the future role and the purpose of business events. Thank you very much, Mr. Schulze.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for the kind introduction. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, you can see my screen. Wonderful. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for the very interesting presentations today, and especially the very first presentation was interesting for me to learn about the power and the future for Greece as a country and as a destination for tourism. What I also like to share with you is that I really appreciate the topic of your today's conference. The topic is tourism of tomorrow, and tomorrow means talking about the future, and the future needs the past, and your country has a great past, and therefore I'm pretty much sure that you will also have a bright future. When I was a young student, I had the honor and the joy to learn ancient Greek. And my very first journey to your country led me to the wonderful city of Thessaloniki. That was in the year 1989. And I traveled the whole way from Munich to Thessaloniki by train. So that was a great experience. And I'm ready to do it again as soon as it is possible. For today, I like to share with you a few insights of research which we started together with the Fraunhofer Institute, which is Europe's largest application-oriented research institute, about the future of business events. And as we heard several times today, the world is changing. It's definitely changing. You can feel it. You can feel it in your private lives. You can feel it and you see it in your business and in your professional lives. It's more an evolution than a revolution. That was also already said. We are in the middle of the digital transformation, and not only since COVID entered our lives. This is one of my favorite pictures. It shows our world, it shows the world map, and it shows the moving pattern of all international scientific rotating conferences and congresses, which takes place every year in another destination, in another country. Like, for example, the World Conference of Radiologists, for example. They are moving every year from one country to another. And this shows the moving pattern of all scientific conferences in the world since 1873. And within the world, 52% of all international rotating conferences take place in Europe. And within Europe, most conferences take place within Germany. Let's have a quick overview about how business has developed in Germany over the last years. Before COVID entered our lives in 2019, 423 million people attended business events in Germany. That's 4.5 times the equivalent of the population of Germany. And that shows how important business events are for our economy, but also for the science sector. Scientists from all around the world meet in order to discuss the latest research results. They start innovations during conferences. We build trust when it comes to meeting people from all around the world and dealing with new businesses, for example. But on the other hand, we also saw that the number of events decreased year by year since 2015. And that not only happened since Corona entered our lives, that's one of the part of the digital transformation, which we can see here already. All events with many events with less than 50 participants went from a physical meeting in a hotel or in a conference center to digital meetings already since 2015. We saw that trend already happening 5 years now. Why are business events so important? It's not only important because they generate revenue in hotels, revenue in convention centers, revenue for transportation companies like German Lufthansa or the German national railway company Deutsche Bahn. But it also helps to build new businesses. It helps to create new entities. It helps to drive innovation, and therefore business events are really helpful to bring people together to build new entities and new businesses. And you can see here that Harvard University did a research, and they asked, the scientists from Harvard University asked, what would happen if business travel stopped? And one of the results was that more incoming business travelers have a positive impact on GDP. And another key finding, which we really experience at the moment, is that moving brains is more important than moving bytes. What does that mean? That has to do with implicit and explicit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is something which I can just consume, learn, but that does not mean that I understand it. And therefore, it is so important to bring people together, to learn from each other, especially when it is about complex topics. Therefore, we did, together with 28 European countries, we started a research together with Oxford Economics in order to better understand what factors need to be fulfilled when it comes to recovery or to revitalize the business events sector in Europe. What factors have been identified? On the one hand, of course, it is important to understand the power and the impact of the implementation of vaccination and testing strategies on future business trips. We need to better understand what official travel restrictions are in place in Europe and the rest of the world. We also wanted to understand how business travel has developed based on past events which have impacted business trips, like September 11 or the world financial and economic crisis back in 2008 and 2009. We need to understand that recovery phases in the style of business trips are different. So smaller meetings, national meetings will recover faster, for example, than large and international conferences. And the personal risk aversion that was also already mentioned by Andreas, the personal risk aversion of the potential participant. That has to do that we need to build trust again for our visitors, for the participants of business events. In each of the touch points they are in contact with when it comes to business trip, from the plane to the airport, to the train, to the hotel, to the convention center and the exhibition site. The entire customer journey needs to be analyzed and restructured. And of course, we wanted to understand long-term changes in demand behavior of participants through digital and hybrid formats, which we learned during the last 12 months to use on a daily basis. And that's the three scenarios which Oxford Economics have created or designed. On the one hand, you have the baseline scenario. You have an upside scenario, which is the positive scenario, which matches with this scenario which you heard earlier today. And last but not least, we have the downside scenario, which will, even in 2027, not come back to the most successful year 2019, because the scientists see that there's only a recovery possible of at least 85% of what we have experienced back in 2019. So that's three different scenarios which have been developed. I think the most realistic is the baseline scenario, that we will see a recovery by later this year in autumn in Europe, and then taking 2022 as a transition year again, and coming back to full swing in 2023 or 2024, depending on different factors. So that's the new now, that new normal which we experience at the moment. There's a certain time of period where we are not able or were not able to meet in person. That's the time where people learn to collaborate and to communicate in the virtual zone. Some are fed up of communicating through Zoom, WebEx, and others, and you know the Zoom fatigue expression. And we fully believe in the renaissance of personal and in-person meetings. They will come back, but they will come back different. And because we learned so how to use those virtual and digital tools. What does that mean for our industry? Physical events in general will decrease for a certain time, and it will take its time until physical events will come back in full swing. But on the other hand, the entire live communication sector will grow because we learned how to run hybrid meetings, how to run multi-site conference, how to run virtual conferences. And that's also a big opportunity for hotels, for convention centers to offer additional digital and technological services and products to their customers, to help them to come back to their destinations, to come back to their locations, but also in addition offering additional digital and technological services in order to involve those participants who are not able to travel to your country, to your destination for the moment, but are ready to join a conference like I do today. So that leads us to different and new products and services. And therefore, we started the Innovation Alliance Future Meeting Space, which is a project which was created by the German Convention Bureau and the Fraunhofer Institute, as I mentioned, one of Europe's largest application-oriented research institutes, with scientists from many different sectors. They run 57 research institutes worldwide, with scientists from the IT sector, architects, but also scientists from psychologists, sociologists, for example, even script writers, which can be included in creating new approaches in developing new ideas and innovative services and products. And together with the research group, we published already many publications about the future of meetings and conferences and congresses. You can download all these publications and just let me know if you need further information. I'm more than happy to share that with you. And one of the key findings already 2 or 3 years ago was that we created 6 future event scenarios. And one of the scenarios I'd like to share with you in more detail right now. There's, for example, the so-called multi-site conference, which is the second from the left-hand side, the so-called multi-site conference, which is a conference which takes place in different destinations in the world at the same time, and all these destinations are interconnected with each other. So that's part of the new new possible convention and conference formats. I like to share one of these new practices, as we call it, because we believe best practices are not yet available. It's only new practices. And the new practice, which we called BOCOM, was a so-called multi-site conference. What is a multi-site conference? A multi-site conference really tries to overcome borders. And we wanted to experience borderless communication in a digital business world. We wanted to overcome borders of mobility, language, communication, culture, and workplaces. And we wanted to showcase technology. And we wanted also to challenge these technologies in terms of networking and interactive formats. We wanted to know whether it works or whether it doesn't. And we also asked our research institute to do a research and a study about that test lab, which we organized back in September last year in Berlin, because we wanted to understand from a user experience, what does it mean for a person who attends one of the destination hubs in Berlin, in Amsterdam, in New York, and meets with other people virtually. We wanted to better understand what does it mean from a user experience when people meet virtually. We wanted to understand what happens if people meet virtually and physically and then meet each other. And that's what we wanted to understand in terms of user experience, knowledge transfer, learning experiences, and so on. And we also wanted to understand whether the CO2 footprint or CO2 emission of a multi-site conference compared to a traditional conference is the same, or what is the performance in regards to CO2. And that's what we also wanted to understand. And I have a video which I like to share with you before we can start. I'm happy to and ready to ask you to answer your questions. Uppsala again. Can you see the video?
We can listen to the sound, but we cannot see the video. Yes, it's playing now.
We are live now to Vienna, to the Akku Hub in Vienna, and I see Michael and Sabine. Hi! And with us in the Hub Essen is Jan Paul Lahmann from the Design Office Hub in Essen. Hi, Paul!
Say hello, Amsterdam, to Berlin, Vienna.
Oh, yes. Hello, Amsterdam!
Here you can clearly see the format of new potential conference and congresses, international congresses and conferences, how it looks like. This is a very interconnected format. We had several destinations, several hubs like Berlin, Amsterdam. We had a hub in New York, in Shanghai, in Madrid, in Tel Aviv. And we had people from all around the world attending it virtually. So we had people in the different hubs. We had people attending virtually. So at the very end of the day, 700 people attended the conference and 250 people attended the conference in person in different destinations in the world. So that's quite complex, and that asks us to, that needs to be, we need to have, and we need to have new skills and competences in place. That's what's new within this world. So it's still a conference. It's still a conference which takes place in different destinations in the world, but it's all interconnected with each other. So we have to train and our skills and competences. We have to create new products and services in order to remain competitive.
Welcome everybody live in Berlin, and of course live in our live stream and live in our hubs. A warm welcome to all of you. Good morning, everybody.
BOCOM is a test lab for borderless communication and collaboration.
Now evaluate all these different formats you experience today. You experience in the hubs, you experience from home.
Well, and last but not least, I only can quote a great Greek philosopher, Pericles, who said 2,500 years ago, "It is not a matter of predicting the future. None of us is possible. None of us has the opportunity to do that. But we need to be prepared for it. And this is great that you just organized a conference which prepares your community, your partners, and your country for tomorrow." Thank you for your attention.
Vielen Dank, Herr Schulze, für Ihre Präsentation. Thank you very much, Mr. Schulze, for your presentation. I would like to add that we're very honored that you have visited so many times Greece and especially Thessaloniki. Also to say that, not to forget that the event attendees and the conference clients are also big spenders. And last but not least, just to inform you and our audience that the Thessaloniki Convention Bureau is doing the last few years a very good job. So in terms of ICCA ranking, we are increasing every year. So thank you very much. I would like to thank all of the speakers. We were delighted and honored to have you here with us. Just to inform our attendees that we're going to have a 10 minutes break. We'll be back in at 5:25.
We're now ready for part 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon again. Welcome back to our Tourism of Tomorrow conference from Anatolia College. I would like to welcome you again. For the people that just came in, I would like to present our honorable speakers that we invited for the round table. We have today Mr. Yannis Tsakalos, the CEO of AQ Strategy, Mrs. Eleni Andreadis, the Head of Sustainability of Sani and Nikos Resorts and Destinations, I would like to add. Mr. Tim Ananiadis, the Hospitality Executive and the Business Leader, so many years in hotel business, or hotel industry. Mrs. Dr. Angeliki Kosmopoulou, the Vice President of the Greek National Tourism Organization, and the Executive Director of Laskaridis Foundation, and Mr. Tarek Kouatli, the Director of Marketing and Development of the Asia Pacific Swiss Education Group. I will pass the floor very quickly to Mr. Yannis Tsakalos, and to welcome him and thank him for accepting our invitation. Mr. Tsakalos, please.
Thank you very much for the invitation to attend your conference. I'm happy to be among friends and colleagues here. And I will try to actually present you quite briefly our strategic framework that we created with Ogilvy for the campaign that the OATS Greek National Tourism Organization will run around the world. So I will like to share my screen.
Yannis, sorry to interrupt, your camera is off.
Okay, Ernest, thank you. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, thank you.
So here we are. This is a part of the strategic framework, actually, that we created with, just a minute, please, with Ogilvy. I have an issue here. Sorry for that. So, tourism in 2020, the unprecedented COVID-19 crisis brought about upheavals actually in health and socialization, transportation and business and the way of work in every human activity and aspect. We do believe that adaptability and flexibility are the two key features of situation management every day, every minute. We have to adapt to the new normal. Events like this, like we call it Black Swan events. And well, the need for the 2021 is the recovery, actually, the main focus is on the recovery, the immediate and only priority. We do believe that there is a great opportunity to create a new narrative for the coming years. So Greece could actually define its position beyond the sea and sun based on sustainable development and could actually differentiate us the next day and give us the competitive advantage. So the crisis could be an opportunity to rethink how tourism interacts with our societies, our other economic sectors, our natural resources, and ecosystems. The challenges ahead is actually to redefine the touristic proposition of Greece by putting people at the center and beyond the sea and sun to a tourism of experiences. We don't have to forget that the generations that are going to be our next travelers out there is mainly from millennials and Generation Z. So we do have to keep in mind to always adapt to this. The new narrative for Greece actually could be framed by the highlighting of the peculiarities of its place, enrich our product actually, gastronomy and wine, art and culture, other activities, wellness. So unique experiences that the traveler actually could find only in Greece all year round and not only during summertime. Exploring the seabed of Crete, walking the paths of Epirus, discover Peloponnese by bike, horse riding in Pelion, learning astronomy in Athens, wine tasting around Greece. The second challenge is actually to adopt a sustainable tourism model, which could extend the seasonality beyond summer through a variety of inclusive experiences from all destinations around Greece. We have created a roadmap actually to recovery based on all the data that we get every single day. We have a unique model, which we call it integrated growth model with Ogilvy, gathering data from all around the world, from 130 countries around the world. And for us, we had to, actually combine the reality with the ambition that we have, the sentiment out there with the vision. This is why we created the 3-year strategic plan for the Greek National Tourism Organization, taking into account the global trends that constantly show, all the changes ahead. We created, what-if scenarios. And from all the research and the data that we collect, we actually made 4 stages to recovery. For us, the 4 stages to recovery actually is from 2020 to mid-2021 is the survival mode, as we call it. From mid-2021 to 2022 is the early recovery stage. From mid-2022 to mid-2023 is the late recovery stage. And from 2023, let's say, by the mid of the year, and then we do believe that tourism is going to come back, and we'll actually see the takeoff, as we call it. So we have to be agile and adaptive. We have to have an agile and adaptive strategy, and we do have to create the new vision, the new narrative for the Greek tourism. Sorry for that. So the communication strategy is based on the actually the sentiment out there. We've seen that the COVID-19 pandemic brought to all people insecurity and fear for tomorrow. For the first time, we feel the same. We feel the same in Greece, like someone who lives in London or New York or wherever. We experience the same monotony, the same rooms, following the same routine every single day. The sentiment out there is the same. We were locked in our home, trying to fit into the same walls, personal, family, and professional life at the same time. Even now, we do the same thing. And once we went out, we took the same walk in the same familiar streets again and again. So we asked, what do you want? What do you really want? What do we want? And we have these answers. I want to see the sun. I want my life back. I want a break. We want silence. I want a night out. And in a world full of restrictions, we've missed almost everything. Dining out at a restaurant with good friends, chatting over a glass of wine, connecting with culture, a sense of freedom, a trip with fresh images, walking through uncharted places. So traveling matters more than ever. We want to feel again relaxed and carefree. We want to travel in a warm country, to feel the sun and the revitalizing energy of the blue sea, to smell and taste new and traditional flavors, to meet people and come closer to nature, to learn from a civilization and a history that is also ours, with human centricity and safety. We want to find ourselves in a place where all these coexist and are offered generously and harmoniously. So the answer to all the ones out there is everything you look for is in Greece. All you want is Greece. This is the main slogan that we use for the campaign that we're going to run. And here you can see some indicative posters that we have created. All you want is Greece. The answer to what you want is always Greece. All you want is Greece. Thank you. Unless it took me just 5 minutes, okay.
Thank you very much.
Exactly, very well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tsakalos.
Nico, thank you. Thank you, Nico.
Thank you very much again, and we're delighted to be the first that we saw a few pictures of your campaign, and we wish you great success for Greece and for your company. It's a great honor for you and for us to prepare all this, and we're very optimistic that it's gonna be a great success. Of course, 2021 is going to be a transition year, but do you really think that Greece, I would like to ask you if you think, do you really think that the Greece's tourism sector be competitive enough to build its resurrection for the post-COVID era 2019?
What was the question? That if Greece?
Excuse me. I will repeat my question. Do you really believe that the Greece's tourism sector be competitive enough to build its resurrection for the post-COVID era, post-COVID-19 era? Do you think that we're gonna overcome this?
I totally believe that we're going to overcome this pandemic. We could be even stronger than ever before. But we have to have adaptability, as I told you before. This is a huge change that takes place all over the world. We have to survive. This is the survival mode that we are in, and then we have to actually redefine our proposal, our tourist product, and build a new narrative, as I told you before, with an enriched product. So yes, I strongly believe. Well, this year, 2021, is quite a difficult year for everyone all around the world, for Greece as well. We predict that. Well, it's not the right time to make predictions. I mean, it's quite difficult, but anyway, we think that we're going to reach the 40 to 50% of 2019 this year, as I show you, I described before, that the early recovery stage, and by the next year, 2022, will become better and better, and then by 2023, we will see again the arrivals to reach the same numbers like 2019 and even better.
Okay, Yanis, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nico.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm going to present now Mrs. Eleni Andreadis, the head of the sustainability of Sunny Ecos Resorts. Mrs. Andreadis, we're delighted to have you here with us.
Thank you all for the invitation. It's an honor to be among you and to have the chance to talk a bit about sustainability. I'm going to be brief because I think the whole idea for this panel after the initial presentation by Mr. Tsakalos was to have a discussion around these issues, and he spoke a bit about sustainability. I think we can't have a conversation about building resilience and looking forward without spending some time to discuss sustainability. It was of a huge importance and a big trend even pre-COVID. But what we're seeing post-COVID is an even greater awareness and willingness from travelers to want to travel sustainably. Just a couple of studies. 3 days ago, I saw a Virtuoso study that mentioned that 82% of travelers want to travel more sustainably. Just yesterday, there was a Eurobarometer study talking about how young people in Europe consider climate change and environmental degradation to be the top issues threatening humanity, a whole 10 percentage points ahead of COVID. So just to give you a sense of how critical these issues are to guests. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing hotel companies really moving ahead very decisively on these issues. And that has to do with commitments that we see from the giants like Hilton and Marriott, leaders in the field, but various other companies making very specific commitments with regards to the main issues facing, sustainability issues facing the hotel industry. So what are considered very material issues to do with energy, so climate change, waste, water, use of land, labor issues. So we're seeing a really big renewed commitment in these issues, despite the financial difficulties, of course, that COVID has posed in the sector. We as a group, so Sani Resort and Nikos Resorts, have quite mature programs in these in the sustainability field. The Sani Green program started 13 years ago. Ecos Green program started over 7 years ago, and we have very specific targets to do with these fields. Our program is structured around 3 pillars. The first has to do with sustainable hotel operations. Having sustainability at the heart of what we do. So it not just being a target and a side thing, but actually being the way that we do things, the starting point. So in that realm, we've introduced, we're the first carbon neutral resort, Sani Resorts in Greece. And we have a zero carbon footprint plan, a project that aims to reduce our energy use, to use more renewable energy, and to offset any remaining energy. So we have a whole array of initiatives that we're unfolding over the next 4 years. And various initiatives to do with water use, with waste. Just to mention, in Ecos Resorts, we already have a zero waste hotel, and that's Ecos Dacia in Corfu. So we have recycling rates across the board that are over 50 or 60%, depending on the property. 60% of our total waste, that would be over 80% of our total waste. And what we've done in Ecos Dacia is we've managed to really have a zero waste operation where any organic waste is either composted or goes to a special machine. The rest is recycled. And of course, we're working a lot on reducing waste. Various initiatives, we have a zero plastic initiative where we've reduced single plastic use by 80% in the last 8 years. And we're aiming to be zero plastic within the next 3 years. We're already almost zero plastic front of house. If it weren't for COVID, we would be there, I think. But back of house, a lot of issues that we're working on. Our second pillar has to do with biodiversity, local biodiversity, and protecting. I think a trend that we're seeing is that people don't just expect you to be responsible in how you do your business, but they expect you to be a force for good in your community. So they're expecting you to really go above and beyond in what you're doing. We have several partnerships with NGOs. For example, in the Sani wetlands, we have a partnership with the Hellenic Ornithological Society. For almost 10 years now, we've been documenting the bird species and implementing measures to help with their protection. We have various other relationships, such as with the IC, the organization where we're documenting the dolphin populations of the Thermaikos Gulf and our waters close to our hotel. So various initiatives aim to actually helping local biodiversity. And then the third pillar has to do with helping local communities. Of course, all the programs we have for our own people and helping our own people move forward. And then also the local community. We have partnerships or are helping actively over 40 organizations. And that's ranging from schools to hospitals to cultural associations. So that's just to give you in the 5 minutes, and I've got a timer here just to make sure that I'm not taking more time than I should, and I've just come to the end of my 5 minutes. So that's just to give you a highlight of the sorts of things that companies, hotel companies, are looking at and should be looking at, and sustainability really being at the heart of how they do things and of what they do. And of course, involving what we've certainly also tried to do is involve our guests. So having things like the eco festivals where they can experience local products and how they're made, or becoming beekeeper for the day and experiencing what it's like for local beekeepers to go about their business and produce local products. Local products is also a very big issue, supply chain. So a whole host of issues that we really all should be very seriously thinking about.
Thank you very much, Ms. Andreadis, for this initial statement, and we're going to have the opportunity to discuss further at the end. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to introduce now Mr. Ananiadis, Mr. Tim Ananiadis. He's a hospitality executive and business leader. Of course, the most of you know him. And I will pass the microphone to Mr. Ananiadis, please.
Thank you, Nico.
Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I've listened for the last hour and a half, and all of the perspectives of all of the speakers. And although our theme is tourism of tomorrow, my worry is that before we get to tomorrow, we have to deal with today's reality. And today's reality is that, and it was not brought up a lot actually, which I'm surprised, is the survivability of the industry. We have three different perspectives. We have the perspective of the client or of our customer. We have the perspective of the operator, franchisor, or anybody that provides services to the industry, and we have the owners. And the reality is that we've had a little bit over a year of no revenues, and we're looking at another year and possibly even 2 years of marginal revenues. So I think all of the discussions that we have to do, we have to keep in mind that somehow hotels and the peripheral industries around tourism have to be able to survive the next 18 months before they get to the tomorrow. From my perspective, from what I saw so far, generational priorities for us will be a big thing in the future. We all should know our customers, and we should know, based on their age, their sensitivities, what's going to be their priorities. I don't think anymore we will have customers wanting the same thing, surviving together, especially different generations and different sensitivities to the health issues that we're facing right now. In terms of our cleaning protocols and everything else that we've been talking about, I think they were always there, and I think they will just be there. But my personal experience over the last 2 months traveling and staying in hotels actually is that I don't see a real customer interest is on what the hotels do in terms of cleaning protocols. Maybe that's my perception, but I don't see the people around me that they go in and out of the hotels really asking or caring how the hotel is preparing, for cleanliness and anything else to protect them, which surprises me actually. But it could be that people that decide to travel, they decide that they will take the risk. One thing that is very important that we need to discuss also eventually is not only the protocols and the safety protocols of the destination, but also repatriation. What happened last year, as you all know, is a lot of people couldn't get back to their own country because of the health restrictions that and protocols that, or lack of travel, not being able to board the plane to go back home. So for us, all those things are going to be they're beyond our own ability to control them. All we can do is be informed about it and make sure that our guests are able to know what it is important for them once they get to the destination, what they can or they cannot do. I do agree with the gentleman about the issue with the conventions. The conferences are a big if, and no matter what we do, until we get back to a 70 or 80% in-person participation, large hotels, conference centers will be suffering for a long time. And at the end, I think that us as a hotel industry, if we talk about strictly the hotel industry, we need to move on. We need to understand that there is another segment of residential offerings that we need to be part of. We need to change our way we're thinking about food and beverage and be more, put ourselves in a position to compete with the restaurants now that do deliveries, that we have to accept the fact that people staying in our hotels, may not feel comfortable for the time being in being public, in public spaces. In general, the sad thing about this whole COVID experience is that they gave us, they basically took the heart and the soul out of the hotels. Was the experience and the reason people went to the hotels, especially resorts, is the public experience, the experience that you have in the public areas, on the beach, on the pool, in a restaurant, and all that is the one, the thing that actually is being hurt right now. And hopefully it will be overcome, because without that, the hotels will not be able to be what they're supposed to be. Thank you very much.
I totally agree with you, Mr. Ananiadis. We will discuss further later. Thank you very much for your comments and for your ideas. And I would like to present now Dr. Angeliki Kosmopoulou. This is, among others, the Vice President of the Greek National Tourism Organization and the Executive Director of the Laskaridis Foundation. Mrs. Kosmopoulou, please. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, all of you. It is really a great honor to be among such a group of distinguished people, and better versed in tourism than myself, I am afraid. It is interesting to have listened to so many different things that are adding up in the same direction. And I'm glad that my friend Tim put forth his own concerns, because I'm afraid that it's as if, we are living at this is a historical moment. We all know that. This means that we only operate on the basis of informed guesses sometimes. The security, which is our safety blanket and the place where we feel familiar to operate out of, is not here. And we have to think strategically, as Yannis so aptly showed us. So we need to think of the big picture, and we need to dream ahead and plan ahead. At the same time, we have to deal with everyday questions and everyday problems. So we find ourselves trying to balance ourselves and our operations among those two fields, the vision for tomorrow and the need for today. Not an easy task indeed. For me, if one goes beyond the day-to-day problems and the pressures that all of us are facing, and that the hospitality sector is facing for sure at a much greater extent, this might be an opportunity to look at things from a distance. This distant glance that is in many cases, unfortunately, lacking from our perspective. And an opportunity to see things the way they could have been, we should have made them to be, and try to plan for the future with a degree of excitement, I might say. So I'm very glad that Yannis showed us that sustainability is one of the pillars of the new strategy of the Greek National Tourism Organization, and very happy that Eleni shared with us some of the things that they are doing at Sunny Ecos. I have to say, I've heard Eleni talk about their projects there, and I'm very impressed. But what businesses like Sunny are doing and what are best practices at this stage. So we need to find a way to add more sustainability in our daily lives and in the future of hospitality. But I'm afraid that we have to start from the very beginning. I mean, we have to start by making the most to turn sustainability into a term that means something to many people. I'm afraid that we tend to use it or overuse it without really understanding its meaning. And Eleni mentioned that this is a trend, that sustainability is a huge trend. And we at the Greek National Tourism Organization also view it as a trend. But for me, with my hat of the head of environmental institution, sustainability is not a trend. It is an absolute necessity. So I think that this time we have to overcome the day-to-day difficulties, but we have to keep our eyes open to the future, and we have to make sure that we design with sustainability as a really important parameter, not only in terms of public discourse, in repeating terms that sound good to our ears and pamper us, but in the basic sense of the word, in the strict sense of the word. And this means that we have to go beyond tourism strategies, I'm afraid, and we have to look closely at what the country can offer at this time. So we have to prepare the country for this beautiful image that we are proposing. We have to go back and see if we have the proper waste management systems, if we have the proper recycling facilities, if we have proper ways to measure our impact, not in specific cases like the one that was described, but they're amazing, and I hope they can scale and they can show us the way to replicate the best practices. But we have to go back to the basics and make sure that we know what we're planning to do and we do not create false hopes. And with this short introduction, I hope that we will have more to discuss about that later on.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kosmopoulou. Very interesting things you share with us. And I would like to invite our last speaker, Mr. Tarek Kouatli, the Director of the Marketing and Development of the Swiss Educational Group. Dear Tarek.
Hi, good afternoon.
Welcome. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you, Nico. It's an honor to be here, and it's a great pleasure to be back with some old colleagues and friends from Anatolia. Thank you to the leadership of Anatolia for inviting me. And it's an honor, of course, to be amongst these distinguished guests. I have prepared a short presentation, and hopefully what I can add to the conversation will also help develop and build up on the conversation that we will have afterwards, more connected to the human resource section of hospitality. And Nico, can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, everything all right, Tarek.
Perfect. So I think it's very important that when we're looking towards the future of hospitality, not only in Greece, but of course globally, that we look at the people that work in hospitality. As we all know, the hospitality industry is a people's industry, not only because of the people that visit the businesses, but because of the people that work in the businesses. Before COVID, I had the pleasure of actually doing a research on how the new generation, Gen Z, will fit into the future of the industry, and how the new generation, of course, Gen Z, views the industry. And I think through this research, it's important within my 5 minutes to make a few notes for the future leaders of hospitality and the current leaders of hospitality and the businesses that are running. So actually what this research was based on was to build an understanding of what we determine as job satisfaction in industries. So that was a neutral component. I looked at the determinants of job attractiveness in the hospitality industry for the non-Gen Z, so usually the bosses, the employers, and the managers, and also what the generation, the upcoming generation that currently makes up 30% of the workforce, perceive as positive attributes. Why this is important is because we need to actually, at the same time as looking towards tomorrow, as was mentioned, looking at today, also look at how we're going to be building up the pipeline of talented employees to work in the industry, and of course creating an atmosphere that would be attractive for them to stay. So retention is quite important. I work with students on a daily basis. I work for a group of educational institutions in Switzerland in which we try and promote the industry of hospitality to them as a future. And honestly, it's been very difficult over the past year or so due to the battering of the industry's image. So I think that this research that I did is quite relevant now. So what I did in this research is actually identify the gaps. What we as an older generation believe is attractive, what Gen Z, the upcoming generation that will be working in the industry, perceives as attractive, and what we are not offering them. So just to be quite brief in this, I'll skip right to the results. To show you over here, we found in this research that there are certain phrases that are most that were expressed highly by this generation, like travel and working in more than one country, safety in a career, meaning that they would definitely find a job. Don't know how relevant that is now with COVID. Meeting people and cultures and learning different languages, a job with meaning. Challenges that keep the work interesting, and so on and so forth. No point in going through all of them. If anybody wants me to share this, I can share after the event. So what is really interesting is to see the gaps. So what that means is that what we perceive and what we believe we are offering to this generation, but we're actually not, right? So I can just go through a few of them to show some interesting factors, such as emotional needs and work stress. Here there's a gap. This is a very stressful workplace. We're not taking care as much as we should of the Gen Z generation. And actually it's interesting to see that their emotional needs are being satisfied by the customers and not by the employers. So they're feeling gratitude, and they're feeling the happiness they receive from the job is actually being satisfied by many of the customers, giving them compliments, for instance. Another one would be, as an example, work autonomy and learning opportunities. I think we've compartmentalized jobs for this generation too much. They're too processed. Task discretion and autonomy, that goes with that as well. How much influence they can have on their job. This generation, the upcoming generation, wants to feel that their job is meaningful and they can make a difference. Most students and employees in this field didn't feel that that was being offered. And of course, flexibility. This generation is a generation that is focused a lot on flexibility. They want to travel around the world. They want to feel that in their job they can actually make a difference, work in the frame and the time frame and the flexibility that they would like to. I'm already past 15 seconds past my 5 minutes, Nico, so I'll just stop it here. I just wanted to bring this kind of perspective to the discussion, and I'm happy to answer questions and contribute as much as I can on this topic in the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Tarek, that you stick on the time. And I would like to ask all our experts to turn on their cameras, please, and keep their microphones off. So, and I would like to also to invite Mr. Anastasiou to join us to address you a few questions, if you agree.
So,
Anesti, you are with us.
Yes, hi again for me. There are so many things that come to my mind that I would like to start discussion, and we can, have a few hours to talk about that. But I will go into some of the things that personally I found very interesting. I will start with something that Dr. Cosmopoulou mentioned. Sustainability is not a trend, but a necessity. And I would like to ask her, or maybe Ms. Andreadis, probably because that's in their field. Can you please further explain that in the perspective of the business of the companies, that they have been suffering financially, and the fact that it's not always very obvious to them to see any financial benefit out of it? And I would like also to involve Mrs. Andreadis in that, because she has the experience of these sort of initiatives, of sustainability initiatives that might end up in some direct or indirect, even financial benefits for the company. So this is the first area that I would like to dig a bit deeper.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, which one of the two?
Eleni, go ahead.
Oh,
Ms. Andreadis.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm going to refer to Mr. Ananiadis first because I consider him to be very wise, and I admire him. So why don't we let Mr. Ananiadis go first?
First of all, let's not confuse sustainability. If any business doesn't have sustainability as part of their strategic plan, then they're way behind. So this is not an issue of whether sustainability is important. The issue is how sustainability is approached by the stakeholders, because the owners, operators, and the customers have three different views of what sustainability means to them. So I think, to go back to Angeliki's point, is sustainability needs to mean something for everybody, not just a vision. To go back to Eleni's point of view, is that you have to have a plan, and the plan needs to be workable. Otherwise, it makes no sense to put a comment out that we will be carbon neutral by 2028. To me, it's great, but it doesn't mean a lot. You have to have a plan, and that plan needs to include all three stakeholders, because if you forget the guy that has the money, the person that actually has to fund that sustainability, because sustainability also requires initial capital, it requires commitment, and also requires research and expert opinions. Because I just had a meeting just this morning that we're talking about sustainability, and the key factor is that the sustainability needs expertise, and that expertise doesn't come within the hotel. It has to come also from the outside with someone that is responsible within the hotel. That's all I have to say on
that. Indeed, I think what we're seeing is that hotel companies, there was a recent article in the Financial Times about how hotel companies are struggling to meet the targets that they've set out with regard to sustainability because of, obviously, the impossible times that we're going through. So I think if I did say trend, Mrs. Cosmopoulou was very right to correct me. I think it definitely is something that is a necessity. It's at the heart of the way we do business. And I really think that we can't talk about it as Mr. Ananiadis said, as something that we're also dabbling in, or it's a thing that's happening alongside. And we can't do that anymore because, especially in the EU with the Green Deal, the money, if you like, will also be looking at that. So I don't know how closely you followed the taxonomy and all these and all these extremely important changes that are happening at the moment, whereby if you don't have a sustainability program, if you don't have an ESG program, as it's known for in the money world, you won't be able to have access to finance. So we're not just talking about guests not choosing you because you don't have a sustainability program, and guests are very savvy now. So we're talking about also the financial world being extremely focused on these issues as a group, because we do have funds that have invested in us. We already have to have very high ESG reporting standards. We already have incentives to be going, and that's only going to be increasing. Just to give you an example, a final example is the pay-as-you-throw legislation that's coming now into effect. So we have high recycling rates because it's something that we've worked on. But now there will be a financial incentive finally with this being implemented from next year probably in Greece, whereby you have a financial incentive to not direct waste to landfill. So I think it's coming together now. So I think that we're going to be seeing there basically being no other way than to do things this way, hopefully.
If I may add something to that, it's not a one or the other approach. You have to, as I said in the very beginning, you have to make sure that, as Tim says, that businesses are going to survive. Because if the sector does not survive, then a big part of this discussion is pointless. But as you're making sure that you're doing the best you can this very moment, you have to keep an eye in the future. And if sustainability is one of those pillars, it's not the only one, by no means. This is what I'm more familiar with, and it happens to be one of the strategic priorities of our country at this stage. So as you're tackling first things first, the way it should be, you have to remember that in order to get where you want to get, and in order to be able to implement your vision, you have to make it very clear and explain it in very practical terms, sometimes to people who do not understand, I'm afraid, the whole concept of sustainability and don't even understand why this also has an economic value to them and to their businesses, as Eleni rightly said.
So having said this last bit of Dr. Kosmopoulou, I would like to ask Mr. Tsakalos and Mr. Quatley about that. Mr. Quatley, about what's the relationship of Gen Z with sustainability? We talked about that the other day, about how aware and how sensitive they are towards that. If you would like to share with us some more insights after your research. And I would like also to ask Mr. Tsakalos afterwards of having that as a strategic priority, and you told us briefly about that's being part of your of the strategy that you designed. If you could go a bit deeper into that, of how exactly this is going to be shown in the strategy, of the things that you can, of course, reveal to us.
Thank you, Nesty. I think that sustainability is actually, it's a very big topic in education, right? I think that it all starts, or maybe a portion of it starts in how we educate our youth. As just a follow-up comment on what was mentioned before, at the schools which I represent, which I work for now, not only the schools themselves have been pushing towards actually becoming green globe campuses themselves, so we need to practice what we preach. We also need to prepare all of the future of the hospitality industry, the future leaders, to understand exactly what what sustainability means, not in terms of only it being a trend, but actually how to implement it in the businesses to gain the corporate social responsibility kind of outreach that they want, but also to gain financial, to have the financial gains that they could to bear from these practices. So it's actually year on year becoming a bigger part of the curriculum at these schools, which I think is very positive. It's a need, it's a must, and it's growing in that sense. From the research that I did, we found it was very clear that the Gen Z select where they want to work more than in the past. And this was a discussion that we had on a private note before the conference, is that the Gen Z and the upcoming generation will really look into what the footprint of a company is, what are the values of the company, how they're treating the planet, and they could easily either join or leave a company because of the lack of having a strategic framework or following certain practices on sustainability. So I think that companies need to not only look at this in order to retain financial gains, or in order to be compliant with the frameworks that are put on the government, but actually to start retaining their employees and of course their clients, as Ms. Andreadi mentioned earlier. So just a closing note would be that please, keep up the good work, because I think that this is what exactly the future leaders of the hospitality industry are being educated to work on, and not only the customers, but your employees are very interested in this as well.
Okay, thank you, Tarek. The question, if I may speak, the question is, under the circumstances, do you think, it's something that's addressed to all of you, do you think that the tourism sector is going to adjust? Do you think that it's going to gain its former position, or we will have to wait a few years? I don't like to be so pessimistic in general, because the tourism is something open, something that provides happiness and well-being. What do you think in general?
I think the plan that Yannis presented in the beginning, from the time frame that he put together on the advertisement, I think that's a trend that it's operational and realistic. So, and thank you, Yannis. That was the first time I've seen that, and makes all the sense in the world. That we need to be realistic, that this is going to be a ramp up. This is not going to be a blip. When we were discussing budgets back in June of 20, we were planning on a full year for 21. Then in September, it changed to half a year. It's still hopeful for half a year. And now we're looking at 22, 23, 24. So realistically, I would take Yannis's little slide that shows the different years and use that as my budget plan for the next 4 years. I think that's my view.
Thank you, Tim. You know that we all admire you, don't you? Let me answer to Anestis first. So we had a brief from the Greek National Tourism Organization, and we, AQ and Ogil, we had to prepare actually the strategic framework. And this is why we had to. This is why we pointed out two basic challenges. The first one is the sustainability, as the first one. The second one, actually, just let me say it again. Is the first challenge actually was to define the touristic proposition of Greece by putting people at the center, and the very second one is to adopt a sustainable tourism model. Totally agree with Tim and Eleni. I don't have to add anything else, and Angeliki as well. And this is why we believe that the sustainable tourism model is the way that we should follow the very next day.
Let me here jump in and remind to to our audience and to you that as we have the COVID crisis as a theme this year, last year the theme of our conference was on sustainability. So without knowing anything, so it was a tendency that now it might be even enhanced or even accelerated because of the current situation. So it's something that was evident, was a priority, and now it's going to become an even, higher in our priorities. If I could change slightly the subject and go to a more business, and we'll come up to what Mr. Aniadi said about the viability of companies nowadays. and to see, we all know that all companies and global economy went and still is into very deep sea, and with cold weather and with very difficult weather conditions and waves to survive. But is there any idea, except of sustainability, of course, that you believe companies should focus towards in order business-wise and financially to survive through that?
Digital transformation.
Can you give a bit more details on that? Because this is something that we heard many times. So if you could elaborate a bit more on that, Yanni.
Well, actually, the change that the exponential technology brings to all sectors out there, but mainly in tourism, will change everything. So we do have to adapt to the new normal, transform our model, business model. Everything changes out there, from the distribution channel makes from the way that our guests will actually choose our hotel, or when he's going to fly, to book or to stay. Everything changes out there. So we do have to adapt. We have to transform actually our business. The artificial intelligence, the big data out there. Easy. And machine learning as well.
Thank you. Mr. Ananiadis, from your point of view, from the management and running of a hotel business?
I mean, hotels were always resistant, hotel industry, I would say, was always resistant to change. It's a traditional industry, still is. So sometimes we were slow to adapt to the new realities. But if we get away from that and we look at the survivability of the business, look, if we're talking about Greece especially, the vast majority of our business, of our hotel business, is small companies or single ownership. Yes, they were given some breaks. Yes, they were given some relief or partial relief on the loans. But a year from now, the reality will hit that all those things will have to be repaid at one point. So somehow that part is what worries the ownership. This is the part that worries, and they don't see that the reality is that we are dependent on other people. It's not what we do. We can do whatever we want, but if the State Department comes up like they did with a direction not to travel to Greece, the US Department of State came out yesterday and said, don't travel to Greece. So I don't care what we do from our perspective, it puts us in a difficult position. So our industry, for the very first time, for a long time, forever, now is dependent on what each country will do or not do on things that they have zero control over. So to me, what I see from the owners that I talk to, they're very conservative and very worried of how they're going to make it for the next 18 months. And we don't really have answers to them because we really cannot tell them what we can tell them what they can do up to a certain point, but it's all dependent if there is no flights between Germany and Greece, you don't have tourism anymore. So we are dependent on other parameters that right now we have zero control over, and that's what worries me personally. That although people want to travel, myself included, I'm not sure they're going to have the ability to travel, or simple thing. I mean, people that are a little bit older and they have to have insurance, if the insurance will cover you when you travel, and how that insurance will cover you, and how you're going to make it home. So to me, it's a very complicated issue. I don't profess to have the answers, but at the same time, I don't see a quick fix to it. I think as hotel people need to be a little bit careful over the next 12 months, not to overspend, let's put it this way, or not to be overly optimistic. This is a time to be a little bit pessimistic from my point of view.
And if you allow me, I would like to add something. The changes which we will witness in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, well, 5, mainly due to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data, we predict that will be larger than those which we actually experienced in the last 50. So those who realize this in time could actually ride the wave and then reap all the benefits. So we have to change.
Just to add something to what Mr. Ananiadis said, it was not Greece that is in this, blacklist of State Department. It was 131 countries. So Greece is among them. And in the first year, that is, everything is allowed, was only one country, that was Bhutan. I was surprised to see that. I was reading that last night. So it's not about Greece, the case, about
but even New Zealand.
True.
Well, the thing though is that please remember that Greece, 90% of our tourism is, tourism from the outside. That's where our problem is. Our problem is the U.S. doesn't really have to worry about. I'm in a place where the hotels are running 70% occupancy right now, but it's Miami, so people leave New York to come to Miami to get away. But they have a domestic tourism that they can survive on. We don't have the domestic tourism to survive on. We have to depend on the Europeans, the Americans, the Asians to come to Greece, and that's where our problem is. Our problem is we're solely dependent on that airplane that will bring the tourists into the country, and that's where differentiates us from, let's say, UK, because UK has enough domestic tourism to keep some of their hotels alive. The same with Germany. We don't have that type of domestic tourism to do that for us.
So, yes, so Mr. Ananiadis, if I can presume, I don't think that you are with the scenario that in 2021 we're gonna reach the 50% of the income and of the arrivals in comparison with 2019.
I wouldn't put my money on it. No, sorry, Yanni.
Yeah.
I just don't see it. I don't see how, because by the time we get the tourism in, it will be mid-June, maybe late June. That gives us 2 months.
Okay, Tim, our prediction actually is between 40% to 60. 60 is the dream.
Okay.
So we believe that it could go like 40 to 50. Nobody knows. Okay. Nobody can predict.
No, the 50 is the good. To me, the 50 scenario is the optimistic scenario.
Okay.
The 40 is the pessimistic scenario. So somewhere around there.
And Yanni,
but it will be a long haul.
Sorry, please, Mr. Ananiadis, please.
No, I'm
okay. Just wanted to add to Yannis that the bad thing is that we lost 5 months already from the city hotels, and now we are depending again on the resort hotels.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, and this is, and we don't know how it's going to be the October, November, December of this year, concerning the city hotels again.
No, but yes, nobody knows. But we
Nobody
expect to have,
knows.
last-minute reservations. We have to wait.
What's the season, Ms. Andreadis? What do you see?
I think, I hate to echo everyone, but the truth is that nobody really knows. What we can say with certainty is that the demand is there. We're seeing great demand. Our bookings until recently were close to 2019 levels for the same periods that was pre-COVID. So there definitely is a huge appetite for traveling that we're seeing, at least amongst our guests. It's just a question of how they're going to be able to get here. And no one can really say. I think all of us hoped that we would be in a better position right now, which clearly we're not. For example, the UK is a really big market for us, and we don't know yet if they will be able to come and under what conditions. And we're hoping for the best, but anything I would say really now, I wouldn't be able to. I think anything anyone would say is just a guess. So I think the most likely scenario, I think that the key takeaway probably is that it is going to take longer than we thought, unfortunately, to build back. And I think the likeliest scenario is that hopefully by November, December, as vaccinations have increased around the world, of course, if variants are, we don't have some crazy, surprise there. But the most likely scenario is that hopefully by 22 we're going to have something that will be closer to normality, and that's my best educated guess. But again, it's a guess.
Yeah, I would like to hear also Mrs. Cosmopoulou opinion. What does the GNTO believes?
We believe what we can track until now, actually, which is very close to what my fellow speakers have said. There is definitely an interest in Greece. So people would love to travel to Greece if only they were able to. And this is something, I think that this is as close as one can really get to the heart of things at this stage. I mean, we know that Greece has done a number of things in the right direction even last year. I mean, the change of our campaign in the course of 2020 and the addition of this new to us component on safety and health, unheard of until then, really worked for us. It really supported this, the country at a time of great need. But this year we're starting again on a clean slate. It's not a matter of interest. Interest is high, as Eleni said. It's a matter of feasibility. And this we will not be able to see until some time goes by. I know that I was telling, I was talking on the radio this morning in Thessaloniki, and they were asking me, and I said that when my family and I decided to make plans for our own vacation this summer, and I tried to make a reservation at my favorite island, the answer was, we're fully booked. There's not one room for July 20th. So this is something that you get back from small places like Donusa in my case. But this is what happens at this time of year. We're still in April. I don't know if in May or in June, people will start changing their plans again and again. So unfortunately, we have to make sure that we keep, the sector healthy, we keep the businesses in place, we keep the brand as interesting and as sexy as we can. And Yannis, I think, is promising us that we will still keep doing things in the right direction, but it's not in our hands, I'm afraid. It's more, it has to do with fate. I know we're not used to adding fate as a parameter in our such discussions, but we have come to a point where this is also something we need to add to our daily life.
Allow me to ask Mr. Gougouliadis to join us because he would like to address a question for all of you.
Thank you, Nico.
Hello, Nico.
I am actually going to share a question. Can you hear me now?
With a lot of echo.
Echo problem. It has to do with the computer which is
yes, I have
next to you or near you.
Is this better now?
It's not that better. I guess that you should close the door or something, please.
Let me get back in a minute. Sorry for this.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Stapoudzis, I can add a comment if you want as well during this Mr. Khourvouliadi break.
Yes, of course.
I just wanted to add that I think it's sometimes you know, a good benchmark for all of my colleagues here would be to look at what the hospitality schools are doing. You know, to see the future. Look at either the Swiss hospitality schools, what we're teaching, and also maybe look at the great schools like ACT to see what they're teaching their future. We use as a barometer and a benchmark over 200 industry partners to kind of project the future, because we need to adapt our curriculum, and we need to adapt the future leaders to actually insert themselves in this industry. At the moment, if you ask us what is most important to what we're preparing our students for, agility, creativity, change leadership, and crisis management. So whether or not things will come back, you know, to where they were in the next year or so, one thing is for sure: there will be fluctuations. I think, in my opinion, there's going to be a much larger need for leaders that will be able to quickly adapt creatively to change, make sure that the balance sheet and the P&L is in place, come up with creative ideas to look at the distribution channels, as Mr. Tsakalos mentioned earlier. So it's, you know, it won't, in my opinion, it won't just come back to the 2019 or pre-COVID levels in 2024 in the exact same form. There will be fluctuations. People will still get scared if a new virus comes out that is not very deadly. People will still be reluctant to travel again, even though it's, you know, I think there's going to be kind of this post-traumatic fear, post-COVID fear that will be there. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add to the conversation. That sometimes it's good to look at the universities to see what they're doing to project the future in your strategies looking forward.
If I may, can you hear me? Let me just ask, since Tarek, I have a question for you. Since you have the experience also from Asia, and we pretty much know that, you know, you step on both continents, Europe and Asia. One question is for you, if you see a different trend and a different behavior, a different approach in tourism education in this new sector, in this new part of the world, compared to the more traditional and conventional Europe. And the other question is a technical question for Mr. Schulze. I will ask the question so Mr. Schulze has the time. It comes from our audience. And so you have time to prepare yourself, Mr. Schulze. The question has to do with this multi-site conference that you talked about. And one of the participants is kindly asking you to clarify how you dealt with the simultaneous translation, the interpretation services that you offered. Were they there in one site? Were they in different site? It was remote? If you could elaborate on the technicality on this. Let me hear first from Tarek, and then the floor is yours, Mr. Schulze. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. Yeah, as you know, I just spent a month and a half in Singapore, including 2 weeks in a bedroom in quarantine, and that goes to prove that the outlook towards pandemic or towards a health crisis in Asia is completely different to the European outlook and the way that they react, and maybe to the Americas. In Asia, they're much more reluctant to open up. They're much more cautious. It's very, very difficult to travel around from point A to point B, sometimes even locally within the same city. And the change factor is much more abrupt. So in Asia, you could get a dramatic change where they tell you, tonight you're out, tomorrow everybody's home for the next month, right? So I think that also reflects in the education that they have, that they're giving towards. I think that change management, adaptability, leadership in crisis has become even more important in the educational system in Asia. I had joined a few conferences in India recently where they're trying even more than before, even more than they would ever imagine, to adapt the industry learnings and the industry changes into their curriculum as fast as possible, because they need to get the students as quickly as possible ready for all of these changes. So for me personally, just in a nutshell, it's a whole different world. Over there, things change much more quickly. There's much more reluctance, and there are much stricter rules. So when an order comes out by the government, it is what it is. You won't see any parties in any squares. Everybody will comply. And the schools comply as well in terms of how they produce their curriculum and they educate their students.
Thanks, Tarek.
Thank you, Tarek.
Mr. Schulze.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Indeed, that project was a quite complex technical system, and in terms of translation, we had indeed remote translators who were based in their homes, in their offices all around the globe, and they were responsible for the simultaneous translation of the entire conference, and it worked really very, very well. And we also used many other technologies, like, for example, VR, AR, but also mixed reality. We created virtual rooms in order to offer opportunities of networking for those who attended our conference in Berlin and those who attended the conference, for example, in Amsterdam. So there are so many different technologies which we tried to use in order to challenge these technologies when it comes to communication, in terms of professional communication between people. We try to implement chatbots, for example. We created an own app and an own platform in order to run the entire system and the entire conference. And still, there are so many opportunities which we have not yet either identified or even tested. The year before Corona entered our lives, I did exactly what Tarek just recommended. I attended an executive education program at Stanford University in order to learn about digital transformation and innovation. And there was a very interesting faculty which is called the Human Interaction Lab, where you even try to create empathy in a virtual environment. I don't say that I like that approach, but it's really, they tested it in order to find out what works and what doesn't. And when we talk about, professional communication, professional collaboration, this will definitely play a role within our lives in the future. And I personally believe that we will experience a renaissance of in-person meetings, not maybe in the nearest future, you just discussed that, but we will experience a renaissance of in-person meetings because we really miss this personal encounters and building trust that only works by meeting a person in person or face to face. But on the other hand, we learned to use all these technologies like we do today. And even I never met you before. I have the fear of missing out. I would like to meet you as soon as possible in person because you are very well educated, smart people talking about interesting topics. And that's exactly what I'm interested in. So this really helps us to even, and that's something we see as well. It's not about technology. It's always about human centricity. It's about the people, it's about the person, it's about their needs and requirements, which we have to meet. And technology could be one solution, but it's not the solution. And this is what we really have to understand, and what we have to learn. And what we experience, there's a new business opportunity coming up, because there are so many communities in the world discussing so many topics only online, and there's a big appetite in the market, in the online market, in the virtual world, to meet in person. And this will create new business events. This will create new opportunities to meet each other. So it's not only that our analog physical world will be transferred into a virtual digital world, it's all the other way around, that what's happening in the virtual world is looking for authentic and real places in order to meet. Because if our entire world becomes more and more digital, there's one thing which is the new currency, it's authentic places. And Greece, I think, is one of the most authentic places I know in the world. And rest assured, as soon as it is possible, I come and will visit you.
All you want
I
is this.
have a quick question for you.
Yes, please.
Were the hubs that you utilized hotels or centers? And the reason I'm asking that, what could the hotels do in order to become hubs for you or any future conference like that?
That's a very good question, Tim. Thank you very much for that. We work together with many partners for that BOCOM test lab. One of our partners, for example, was Siemens, as a global company, and they wanted to understand how multi-site conferences work for their needs and requirements. We work together with Accor, one of the largest hotel chains in Europe, and they offered us 2 or 3 hotels which they updated with all the technology which was needed. We work together with co-working spaces. For example, in our Berlin hub, we used a co-working space for the conference because they have the ideal environment, for example, for multi-site conferences like this. But we also work together with special event locations in Amsterdam. I think that was a museum where we met with the other colleagues from the Netherlands. We had a conference and exhibition center which was involved. So it's scalable at the very end of the day. But what is important for us, and that's also what Tarek said, we have to understand and we have to change our curriculums. We have to better understand what we need to or how we need to educate and train our people, because it's not only about hospitality in the future, it's also about technology. And we need to understand how to use this technology. We need to have digital competences in place within our industry, within our companies, to get ready for the needs and requirements of tomorrow's customers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schulze, for that. Since we moved to some of the questions of our audience, there is an interesting question for Mr. Ananiadis from a graduate of ours. And she's asking that we talked about adjustment in tourism industry, but in the same time, we say that COVID is here to stay and that we stand on a new page. And the question is, how can someone adjust when finds himself in total new circumstances? And in the bottom line, is it a matter of adjustability or a matter of a new business model that we eventually emerge?
Okay, I'm not sure. Okay. Well, first of all, I wanted to go back to Tarek's presentation that our industry, it's still is working from 2 different perspectives, the perspective of the people in the industry and the people entering the industry. And we have a lot of gaps to make up for. So, I mean, my short answer is that it's a combination. I think that since this is gonna be a long ramp up and it's gonna have a financial effect on the hotels, they will unfortunately, they will be also reluctant to hire new people and to put programs in place for the new people and to spend the money that they should spend to educate their new employees and to give them the feedback that they need. However, on the other hand, I think the industry is proven before that once the demand is there, we're very quick in rebounding. So from my perspective, is that this is a learning experience up to a certain point, but we need to be patient. What unfortunately, we're not the patient group of people. We like to, everything that we do is immediate. I mean, you can't tell a guest in a room, wait 2 hours for your towels. You're gonna bring the towels in 5 minutes, otherwise you lose. So we are an industry that doesn't make appointments 2 weeks out. They make decisions right then and there. So we are an industry that can rebound quickly, and I think we will rebound quickly. So if I was a student entering the field, I would be a little bit patient, but I think you will be pleasantly surprised because hospitality is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Some people may work in different fields. There's still the Airbnbs, VRBOs, and everything else out there. It's part of our industry anymore. So at the end, it will be a different, some differences, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. It needs to be patient for a few more months.
Thank you, Mr. Maniadis. I would like
I
to
think
ask I'm sorry, please.
I'm sorry, if I could also just add to that. I think that we shouldn't lose track of the bigger picture also. I know it's easy to get extremely pessimistic because of the current situation. And I also saw another question that you might come to about smaller hotels being not having bookings. And I think we need to reiterate again, I think Mr. Tsakalo said this before, that we're all expecting last minute bookings and hoping for last minute bookings. So I don't think, I think, again, it's not a matter of demand, but a matter of people being able to get here. So we're not going to know, unfortunately, for a little bit of time. But the bigger picture, and looking at the bigger picture of building resilience, I would really, and Tarek, in terms of what is being studied at the moment, I would hope that sustainability is also very high up. I would really encourage people to use this time also. That's what we've been doing in our company, trying to use, when not working different forecast scenarios and trying to, adapt to, all these changing scenarios. Definitely, to focus on building the skill set and creating our programs, improving our programs to do the sustainability. And I would urge students to definitely focus on learning more on that if they don't know already, because that's definitely something that when we, build back and come back, it's going to be very much at the heart of what we do.
Building on what Ms. Sandradis just said, there is a question from the audience, most probably Ms. Kosmopoulou, representing the GNTO, may answer that, is the concern of smaller hotels and any guarantees or any protocols that they will be following, and the tourists will be following, especially those coming by car. Is there anything on that? Because indeed, there is a general expectancy that bigger resorts will be first to be booked out, but smaller, hotels and premises will not have the same occupancy rates.
This is something that is, we are considered about that, as you can guess. So we are trying to make plans so that all tourism businesses, regardless of size and regardless of their location within the country, will be supported. But as I said before, we're still trying to improve what we have to offer to the community. So it's not a specific. I mean, it's something that we're still working on at this stage.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions? Nico or Anesti, that would you like to ask?
I would like to ask Tarek a question concerning the education, because I think education is it's a very important factor in terms of our hotel industry. Do you think, Tarek, that the Generation Z is the most qualified and the best educated people that working now at the hotel industry and the tourism industry in general?
Oh, that's a tough question, Nico, because then I would, if I say yes, then I'm actually downgrading the abilities of almost everybody on this call and and listening right now. I just want to give my 2 cents on the previous topic. Just quickly note a quick piece of advice. I would say that for small hotels, small businesses, I would really urge on the topic of further education for them to take courses on revenue management. In some of the research that we've done, we found here that at least in the Swiss schools that I represent, that the smaller businesses are really still using that horizontal approach to pricing. And I think that people would really benefit from having a more flexible price structure and price offering to their clients, if they, especially in times of crisis. In brief, if you can make more money off of a specific client, then and you have the opportunity to do so, please learn how to do that and use the revenue management tactics. So I just wanted to make that quick addition. There are short courses all around that you can join in on. It's revenue management is a science. It's not that easy, but I think it's very, very useful for all businesses. I'm sure Ms. Andreadi and Sunny has a revenue manager focused only on that, on sales and revenue management. But
absolutely, I would definitely agree with that. And in my experience of skills lacking within the industry in Greece, for sure.
Yeah. To answer the other question, Nico, what I can't say if they're the best educated or they're not the best educated, but I think they're the most empathetic of all generations that have come up. This is the generation, whether we believe it or not, even though they're on screens all day, and we have the millennials believe that the Gen Z is stuck on their screens all day. They're actually much more culturally aware. They have much more through the screens. They're being exposed to many cultures, many different locations. Actually, they've been traveling around the world without moving from home. And they believe in empathy, and they believe in philoxenia, which we talk about in Greece, which is hospitality, actually, where hospitality derives from. So I think that they're great employees. I think that they could be your best employees in businesses if you find, I'd love to send everybody the results of my research, because you really need to know how to press on their buttons and make them feel comfortable. They can make your clients, which will soon be Gen Zers as well as time goes by, feel much more comfortable, much more welcome, much more happy, and they feel like they're in a business that is much more with much larger values, such as sustainability, as we mentioned earlier, a sustainable company than we can, right? So I think that's the important point that I would like to make. They're great, but please be very, very aware of what their needs are and make them feel. Sometimes in businesses, we tend to look at the client and we turn our back to our employees, which are Gen Zers, and many times, and we don't tend to their needs. And all of a sudden, you have retention, and you say, "Why did they leave?" So yeah.
Thank you, Tarek. I would like to hear also Nicholas or Anesti's opinion about that in terms of the act.
Just let me add something to what Tarek said. If you have to manage only Gen Z, situation might be a bit simpler. The problem is if you have to manage people from different generations at the same time and to use a different set of techniques for each of them, it makes the manager's job a bit more puzzling, and he has to juggle around the different kind of motives he needs to give to different generations, different kinds of people. coming back to that, because I think Nicholas and myself, we have cumulatively, we should have about half a century of teaching experience, Nicholas, you know. It might sound a bit terrifying, but I think we have about 25 years of teaching experience each. I believe that what I see in the last decade or so, I wouldn't call them Generation Z or anything like that, but I used to call them as the non-Facebook, but the Instagram generation. And now the newer one is the TikTok generation. So this generation, the much newer, let's say, groups of students that we're having, they have definitely much different sort of skills. I cannot say they're more skillful or less skillful, but definitely the skills that they have is definitely much different than the ones, the skills that the previous generations had. Previously, even the educational system was more like knowledge-based, and now we tend towards skills. For example, having mentioned Tarek and Eleni about revenue management. Revenue management was from the very beginning of our master's program a course that is among the most popular ones for students, because they see the necessity of that as a major thing that they should know how to apply in reality when they join the industry afterwards. And at the same time, people who are students of ours in our master's course who are professionals, they still choose the same course because they need to go into it even deeper. But I believe that the interesting fact would be, as Tarek very nicely said, that since we see that this generation is becoming the supervisors today and the managers of tomorrow, and maybe the business owners of tomorrow, I think that is the point that we will see the major change, that since they will be the main decision makers of that. Nicola?
And to further build on this, I would focus on the fact that this generation, because you know, generations always evolved in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 90s. I would say I would focus on the fact that these are the consumers of tomorrow. These are going to be pretty soon the ones who will build their new families. They will travel by couples. And I can imagine how difficult this will be for professionals who try to attract them, Ms. Andreadis, Mr. Ananiadis, or Mr. Chakalos and Ms. Kosmopoulou, in order, sorry for this, in order to promote efficiently your campaigns, because we're talking about a generation that, you know, when we were younger and we used to travel, we would take a few pictures, I don't know, one film, you remember all the Fuji and the Kodak and the Agfa films that we used to have, and we would come back home, and those who were lucky, we would share a few pictures of our travel inside the friends and family network. Today, every single visitor, every single one, posts a picture. This picture automatically becomes public, whether it's positive or negative. It's a restaurant, it's a city room, it's a hotel room, it's a resort room, it's a monument, it's a sightseeing venue. And you know, I cannot imagine how difficult it will be to convince these highly demanding consumers when they will become the systemic, the base, you know, customer target group of everyone, even for MICE, even for all kinds of business activities and events, not only for tourism and traveling for pleasure, but also for business. But that is why, you know, educational institutions evolve. It is by default a very flexible environment that, you know, knows from day one that we have to adapt and, you know, always be alert for any new developments in the market. It is not, I can give you an example that, you know, we are not teenagers, we are not in our 20s or 30s, but we do follow Instagram, we do follow Snapchat, we do follow TikTok, we do follow, you know, Facebook is history, it's a little old now. So this means that, you know, something new will come up in the new couple of years. We follow the cryptocurrencies, the Bitcoin, in all aspects, we have to stay updated. There is no end in that. At this point, because we're coming towards the end of this webinar, I would kindly ask if any of the panelists has any other statement or something that we perhaps haven't thought of that you would like to share with us. If someone feels that she or he has something additional to contribute.
Nico,
I would like to add something, a small tip.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, we do believe that the mindset changes from the peak of the infections in each country in, let's say, about 30 to 40 days. So we have to count, like, let's say if it's the top of infections in, I don't know where, in France, we have to count 30 to 40 days to see that change coming. So, I mean, starting, search and then book. That's a small tip.
Tarek?
Nico, I just wanted to again add to what you said that, as I mentioned earlier, if you look at the curriculum of the hospitality schools, and of course there's a lot of research already being done on Gen Z and how they will behave as a consumer, you'll see that in the curriculum of hospitality schools, they're mainly focusing on Gen Z as a customer. Most of the business plan, the strategies being built, the way to market, the way to build your pricing strategy, and the way the interior of hotels or any hospitalities businesses are being designed. As I mentioned earlier, it's sometimes good to look back at what the educational institutions are doing to see the future. This is what we're focusing now on. So Gen Z is the next consumer that will soon have the buying power that would be attractive and we will be the senior living management target group for the hospitality industry, and the Gen Z will be the next group, and we're already focusing on them quite a lot. So I just wanted to add to your thoughts, which are completely correct.
And I also like to add one thought, which Eleni just mentioned, that we should always have the bigger picture in mind. And it's not only about tourism of tomorrow, it's about everything of tomorrow. It's about many megatrends. We did a megatrend analysis. What will impact our lives in the future? It's, of course, mobilization, it's digitization, it's globalization, it's sustainable development, it's diversity. And all these megatrends will impact our lives, and that will impact urban development, that will impact the way we work and live in the future. And that, of course, then will also impact how we travel, how we use our spare time and things like that. And when we learn from companies in Germany that allow from one day to another the entire staff to work 3 days a week from wherever they want, and only 2 days a week to come to the office. Imagine, German companies decided from one day to another, not only for the time of the corona pandemic the corona pandemic takes, but also for the time after corona, that has been decided, and the unions have agreed on it, and that will change the entire way how we work, how we live, and not only generation Z or Y, but also my generation. And I used to live in Nuremberg, which is in the northern part of Bavaria, but my office is headquartered in Frankfurt, which is a 2 hours ride with a high-speed train. So I did that for 10 years. Every morning I took the train from Nuremberg to Frankfurt and the way back on the same day. So I made almost 500 kilometers per day, each day from Monday to Friday when I went to my office. Today I can work from home. I can decide totally different to how I create my working day. And there are so many different opportunities for all of us, which we have to take into consideration. And that will affect, in the very end of the day, tourism, business events, and all the rest as well.
That's why we are planning the meetings and the conventions for 2030, as I saw in your website.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And beyond.
And beyond.
Thank you, Matthias. So if we are okay, we will wrap it up. I would like to thank every single one of you on behalf of the American College of Thessaloniki. I would like also to thank all the attendees. We hope that we have lived up to your expectations. I wish you a very, very prosperous and safe and healthy summer. Let's hope that we will return to normality soon and that we will, of course, learn our lessons and, rise up better, updated, and more efficient. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Evharisto.
Bitte, danke.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.